Welcome to Scoreboard, the podcast that explores how athletes, both current and retired, define success beyond the game. Each episode dives into the mindset, financial decisions, and career choices that shape their personal scoreboard, whether they're still in the arena or transitioning to life after sport. From victories to challenges, we reveal how athletes take charge of their own paths and decide what truly matters on their scoreboard of life. I'm your host, Chris Titley, and welcome to Scoreboard. Welcome to Scoreboard. Today we're joined by Nathan Hauritz, former Australian Test cricketer that has come into the studio here in Brisbane. Nathan, thank you so much for being part of this series.
Not a problem, mate. Thanks for having me.
Nathan, I'm going to start with the very high-level question around what has defined success as a professional sports person, going back to your childhood, being a professional cricketer now, looking back into your life. What was success? What did success look like as a child to you?
Look, I think as a child it was getting that opportunity to hopefully represent Australia. When I grew up, it was always about wearing the baggy green, lived and breathed it every day. No matter what I was doing, I just wanted to play cricket for Australia. And a lot of those players growing up, David Boone was my idol. Players like Viv Richards as well.
Yep.
And
no helmet.
It was completely different back then. So for me, that was probably the ultimate success that I could eventually have.
And the interest in cricket, where did that begin?
Yeah, look, it's my granddad's farm, Kingaroy. So I was only about 4 or 5. He used to play a little bit of cricket back out there, and we used to have a lot of family days on a Sunday. My whole family, all the relatives lived around Kingaroy, Mergen, that sort of stuff. So every second Sunday we'd be out there and we'd play cricket, and it was a huge acreage, and just go there, play, and I would always just want to bat. I was always told that I was such a annoying little kid because I always just wanted to bat.
Wanting to bat, what was it about batting that you enjoyed the most as a child?
Oh, look, I think it's just probably as a child you're the centre of attention.
Yep.
When you're doing that, and the ability and the feeling that you could hit the ball as hard as you could. And I just really enjoyed that. And when I didn't really bowl much when I was young growing up, I did eventually, but yeah, that feeling of just standing there, hitting the ball all the time, didn't have to do anything, didn't have to chase a ball. And I think a lot of kids start out like that. They just, it's just throwing the ball to me and you just whack it back at them.
Was there a moment in your youth where you maybe met someone or you saw something that was like, I just want to keep going and keep playing cricket? Was there some memories there from your childhood?
Oh, look, I remember starting out really young. I started in Hervey Bay. We had it was under 9s and under 13s, and then under 11s, under 13s, and then under 16s. We didn't have heaps of teams, and my first game ended in tears because I got out first ball. But I just remember snippets of the game being so fun, and our teams. Back in the day was Hayden was a team, Border was a team, Bradman. So he had all these names, and it just personified who I followed as an idol. And I had so many good memories about being even away from the game. I used to practice by myself, throwing a tennis ball against a brick wall, and have ABC Grandstand up, listening to the test matches. And
the sound of summer, Jim.
Yeah, it was just amazing. And that was me. I just loved, I could do that all day, every day. And I think that's probably where the love started. And just watching cricket at home, with my family, mum and dad, we used to bring the TV into the lounge room because we only had one TV.
Have to move it with the coat hanger, the aerial?
Pretty much. It was just like that, and I think you grow up and you watch those games when Australia's defending 200 to win or whatever, and how they played, that just stuck with me for the rest of my life. And
as you grew through your youth and got picked in teams and selection, etc., and you mentioned you got a duck in your first game, in terms of the harshness of reality of being selected, can you talk about that as a junior, of missing out on some particular teams?
Yeah, probably the most prominent memory it was an under-12 team. You might have even been playing in the championship, I'm not sure. It was a Wide Bay. We were trying to get picked for Queensland. I think it was Queensland schoolboys. I reckon Stevie Paulson played.
Was it Maryborough? No?
There was a Bundaberg one.
Yep.
I definitely played against you in Maryborough. I remember that.
Yep.
There was a Bundaberg one. I'd played a couple of years for Wide Bay, and I was starting to become a pretty decent batter, and I was sort of batting 5 or 6. I was bowling a little bit, and I had a really horrible tournament, and I might have only scored 100 runs, and it wasn't a great tournament. I didn't get picked for Queensland, and I had all these hopes as an under 12-year-old to get picked. So Watto was there, Shane Watson, Stevie Paulson got picked, a lot of these other guys, and I remember I was just absolutely shattered. drive back from Bundaberg to Harvey Bay was about an hour and a half, and I was just in tears the whole way.
90 minutes of distraught.
Yeah. And look, Mum and Dad tried to console me the best they could, and I remember that moment was just so vivid that every other selection after that as a young kid growing up, I just know that I had to work harder and harder and harder. As the game progressed, the thought of selection is really based on how well you are performing. And I guess for me personally, I was a little bit of a different cat because I was sometimes selected because they needed an off spinner in the Australian team or whatever, and there was no other off spinner. So as long as I was performing at a decent level, I was being picked. I wasn't one of these guys that literally was busting the door down to get picked. I had a couple moments where I was, at the top of my game and didn't get picked, which was really disappointing. But once you get to that ultimate level of professionalism, it's just like, okay, I've just got to keep going. It hurts, but as long as I keep focusing and staying in my lane, then the rest should take care of itself, hopefully.
You did mention that you were focusing on batting and then you became a well-known bowler. When did that happen?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've been asked it a few times. I reckon probably the main was when I was playing for Norse. We had, I think, 7 or 8 incredible batters. And at the academy, when I was about 17, 18, I worked my batting, but not hard enough. I worked my bowling a lot more. And I was in the Australian 19s team as a number 7, number 8 batter and a bowler. And I started to just slowly morph into a bowling all-rounder. And then when I was playing first grade, I was batting 8 and 9 as a bowler. And the batting probably, I played grade games and not bat, play, second 11 games and bat 9, and I'd bowl a lot. So I stopped working on my batting. And those 1 or 2, probably 2 years, I reckon, maybe a little bit longer, my batting just went downhill so fast. It was just incredible how badly it went. But my bowling was improving and I was getting better. I was getting picked inside as a bowler. So I still had in my mind that I was an incredible batter, but I wasn't doing the work. And once you start playing against men, you get found out so fast. And I think probably when I wasn't doing the work, I probably became a little bit scared of the ball at that age as well, like 18, 19, 20. Because when you're growing up around that age, it's a lot different now. Young kids who are 15, 16 are playing against men, whereas back then it probably wasn't as renowned. I remember playing my first grade game, I batted 8, so Trevor Barsby was playing and all these guys at Sandgate. And I was facing decent bowlers, and my game, I was okay as a batter. I was solid, but I always felt I was a top order batter. But you needed to do 3 hours of batting, 3 hours of bowling, and I just didn't do that at that period, which just went from there.
Before we go on to your professional era, the feelings when you come off a cricket field, every game is different. Broadly speaking, were you happy with most of your performances, or there's a number of where you went, oh, actually, this is just terrible, and you come off with a negative feeling?
It's a good question. It's something that I look back on my career, and I've always said there's more bad days than good, and it was probably because I reckon I was really tough on myself, but at the same time, the professional side was so tough. Following Shane Warne's footsteps and being in that public arena, there was so many people that were just so easy to commentate on how bad a cricketer I was, and I was a bit of a, I'm a bit of an emotional person when I want to be, and you listen to that stuff all the time and you read the papers, and, when you feel as though when I was playing, the spinner was always the easy person to be left out, no matter, like if you are playing really well, the conversation would be, mate, you're playing well, but today we're not going to pick a spinner.
Yeah.
Or, mate, we just haven't got enough overs into you, so, we're going to stick with what we've got, so we're going to, Andrew Simons is going to, bowl our spin or whatever. I really struggled with that, and that was probably something that, carried throughout my whole career. Even if I played well, I was always looking over my shoulder, waiting to read something or see something on social media. But when I've been coaching recently young kids, it's amazing to think, my career was a lot better than what I thought. I just remember those hard moments. So I'd probably have to say I was happier rather than not as happy with my performances throughout most of my career. Yeah.
And getting to that goal as a child and being selected for Australia in Test cricket and getting that baggy green, take us back to that moment.
Yeah, look, it was quite fortuitous, so it was one of those things. I'd played really consistent cricket and one-day cricket for Queensland. I was playing okay cricket in 4-day it was Pure Cup back then. I was going okay. I was doing a solid job. I remember getting picked on my first test tour and I didn't play a test. I was 12th man for 6 tests. I'd played some really good cricket and I was training really well and did a great job. Anyway, so we move on to the next year. I had a really tough year. I didn't play as well as what I had. And
being so close as 12th man, thinking, okay, I'm very, very close, then having a tough year must have been hard.
Yeah, look, as a young kid who probably... So the biggest problem with my career was that I was never really ever happy with the way that I was landing the ball. I was always looking for that very consistent ball. So you watch Nathan Lyon now, he could land the ball with his eyes closed and spin the ball and bounce and like incredible action. Whereas my action was something that needed work, it needed fixing, it needed honing with a coach, and we just didn't have that. So I was always trying to work on my own game every day. So I'd bowl for 2 hours and I'd probably find 3 balls that I was happy with. So it was just such a vicious cycle, and doing that while you're playing is really tough. And so the year that I didn't play as well, Cricket Australia they picked the Test tour. They didn't want Stuart McGill and Shane Warne. They wanted an off spinner. I was literally the only off spinner, and I was doing an okay job. And I've been doing okay in one-day cricket again. So I picked go over, and then throughout the series I'd bowled okay. And then leading into the last test, Shane Warne was in the far net, not far from me, and got hit on the thumb. Just sort of, shook his thumb around, a little bit of commotion. Like I wasn't playing again, so everything was fine. And then I wake up the next morning, Warnie's got a broken thumb, he's going home, I'm playing the test. I didn't know anything about it, so this was on the morning of the test.
So the night before your first test, you didn't know you were playing your first test?
Didn't know I was playing.
And was that a good thing in hindsight, you think?
Probably. Look, Punter had a bit of a chat to me the night before. He just said, look, we don't know what's going to happen. You've been bowling really well. Don't need to, don't overthink too much. Just, we'll just see what's going on. And then getting up in the morning, it was literally...
Did you overthink it? Go to bed that night? Do you think, tomorrow's the day?
Nah, look, I think probably because I'd been 12th man so much, I just was like, look, it's probably not going to happen. And look, deep down I wanted my parents to be there as well. Yeah. So, look, they went through everything to be with me. And but that aside, waking up in the morning and getting the nods going, mate, you're making your debut, you just start to... really just don't even really know what to think. I was a kid. I wasn't a kid that had 300 shield wickets behind me or dominating. I was just a guy picked, on the back of steady performances.
Your childhood dream is coming true in about 2 hours.
Pretty much.
And you think, what now?
You start. That's probably for me. I started to doubt everything. Am I ready? Am I going to be okay? Yeah. I already had a massive cut on my finger, because you've been bowling so much. I'm like...
Didn't tell anyone about that, though.
Oh, no, everyone knows. Because, you got to tape it up and you're putting glue on it. And I'm like, I hope my finger holds together. And so anyway... all
many emotions.
Yeah. So we get out there and, the test happens and it was everything I thought it was going to be. It was so nerve-wracking. It was incredible space to be part of. All of those, like those legends of the game. You had, the batting order was Hayden Langer, Ponting... Martin, Michael Clark made his debut that series, Darren Lehman, Simon Kadich, then he got Brett Lee, Gillespie, McGrath, Bickle, myself, Warnie had left, he was there but he'd left.
And these are names that you watched on TV growing up as a child, and how did that feel, I suppose, with these people that you're going, 5 years ago going, wow, Matthew Hayden's a fantastic batter, and now you're in the same team?
Yeah, look, I think probably the
one... You
one...
say, g'day, I'm Matt. You're like, no, I know who you are.
Yeah, no, I know who you are, yeah. Well, we're both from Kingaroy.
All right, as an example.
So, look, probably the biggest thing I took for granted was, because I'd been around the group so much, was the camaraderie and how relaxed it was outside of playing the game. Look, I'd been in the inner sanctum a few times. I played the few one-dayers, so I understood the nervousness and the professionalism about the game. But I remember sitting with Haydos and he just said, look, Test cricket is just the next level. It's nothing like one-day cricket. One-day cricket's good, it's fun, but when you go to Test cricket, that's when everything just gets, just exemplified. And being out in that field and how just professional and how everything was structured and run and how we had to adapt and be part of it, I very much just I didn't get into the moment of this is Test cricket. Like I'm like, this is pretty cool.
So the
I'm
focus
having fun.
was so on, your own, I suppose, executing what you'd thought and everything around it and soaking up the atmosphere that you didn't actually stop to realise and go, hang on a second, I'm in the middle here. And there's millions of people watching me.
100%. Look, and I was very lucky. First innings, because we played on, it was that old Wankhede Stadium, and the wicket was almost rolled mud. The groundsman eventually lost his job after this game. First day was washed out. We went on the second day. We bowled first. We'd rock and rolled them for, I think it was like 120 or it was 100. And it was so hard for them to bat. I was bowling, it was spinning miles. I took 3 wickets. I was like, this is pretty cruisy. Like I didn't have to bowl to anybody of real significance. But then when I went out to bat, as I was sitting there padding up, I was just waiting and, the game was getting on and we were getting out left, right and centre. You can imagine facing their spinners. I remember Buck coming over going, look, because Mardo was batting. He goes, look, Mardo's in there, just rotate the strike. You're a good player, just relax, enjoy. It's going to be quite nerve-wracking. Then literally as I walked out, I remember literally just being swallowed whole by the feeling of the Indians around me, the crowd, and Anil Kumble running into bowl. And I just didn't, he didn't switch on laser focus straight away. I was like, okay, cool, I'll be right. I'll just, So first ball, bang, spun miles. I'm like, I'm in massive trouble here. Second ball thrown up, tried to hit it over long on's head, out. Like I was caught mid on. So second ball duck in my first innings of Test match cricket. And that's when it really hit me. I was like, okay.
The dreams come true playing Baggy Green and then 2 balls in, you're out. You're like, well, that was quick.
That was very quick. I was just, what am I doing? Like I just...
Yeah, because it was overwhelming.
Overwhelming, all these guys, and then, look, I was very, in the second innings, we had a tiny lead, maybe 30 runs, and I was bowling, Tendulkar was taking me down and it was spinning, but they just made sure they had to take me down because it was going to spin and cause drama. I got Tendulkar and Laxman out, but not before I went for 4 runs and over. Went for 80 off 20, and I didn't do my role within that. Michael Clark took 6 for 9.
Right,
that was that test.
Yep.
So, and at that stage, so once you're in that moment, my finger had split. It was just blood. It was so sore, but you're just there trying to do your job, and because at that moment I've got to almost win the test.
Yep.
And so many thoughts going through your head. I remember before the test, I was working with Greg Matthews, and he's like, you've got to get your feet straight, man, and you got to compete.
Far
and all
out,
stuff.
Far out, brother.
All this stuff. Instead of just,
yeah.
I think as a young kid these days,
you had lots of messages.
Yeah, and because I didn't have one message for myself of land the ball, you're good enough, go. Just compete.
As in, you've been picked for a reason because you're good enough.
Yeah,
and that's to show that you're good enough. Yeah.
Also, fingers sore, can't get in close, crowd. Anyway, so we ended up chasing 100 to win in the last innings, and I remember going out to bat. I think we were 7 for 40, something like that. So I'm walking out on a second ball duck, and you got Harbhajan, Murali Kartik, and Anil Kumble just tearing us apart. So I'm walking out there with Dizzy was batting, and he just was laughing, smiling. He's like, let's do it. Let's see what we can do. So anyway, so I got a few runs. I was able to get through and survive, and we put on about 30. And
back in the game,
I was starting to feel at a stage, we're doing okay here. I was surviving and going, like, Harbhajan was incredible. Like, you could hear the ball fizzing before it bounced, and I was like, sort of like, this is amazing, because I remember watching the 99 series when he dominated, but here I am trying to survive and win the game. And then Kumble got me out LB. I felt it was just going down leg side, just played a really nonchalant shot and out LB. And that's when I'm walking off going, I could have done something here, but the old 18, 19-year-old kid who's very relaxed and not super laser focused is what we talk about, and like, you guys aren't going to get me out. I'm going to win the game, win the test. That didn't really click into gear. That didn't really click into gear till I was a lot older. And that's my most earliest experience of, remembrance of the test. Yep. And, coming back from that, I probably a kid who, not someone that I've got to be back in that arena. It was like, I've got to be a better player. If I want to be at that level, I've got to be way better.
Yep. And then through that test, I suppose 12 tests, was it? Or you played?
Me, I played 17 tests?
17 tests, yeah. And then through that, obviously the next test became a little bit easier to handle, you think, or not? Or was it
Nah. Look, I think because I had a long break in between the first test and the second test, I had a really, horrible career in between that. I just really struggled. When I talked about earlier, that technique, my bowling technique was so bad. I was changing, I was doing things. I was never somebody just to be able to do the consistency correct. I just couldn't do the right things. So that second test, same thing, come out of nowhere. Jason Krazer had just taken wickets in India, played in Adelaide, rolled his ankle in Adelaide. They'd lost, played in Perth, and then he didn't bowl well again. And then in Adelaide, he rolled his ankle in the warm-up, in a warm-up.
Yep.
So I'd been playing for New South Wales. It was my second year in New South Wales. I'd played really well down in Adelaide the week before. I bowled to Yusuf Khan, old Pakistan player, and I just was so good. My game was just on point, and got a phone call coming back from Pete Forrest's dad's funeral. Yeah. And my phone had rung 4 times, private number.
You weren't going to answer it.
Wasn't going to answer it. No. Anyway, so then was told, got a phone call, said, Nathan, you've got to pick up the phone because Chairman Selectus is trying to get in touch with you. Anyway, spoke. I was just in shock, really, because I was just starting to get to a stage where I'm like, okay, game's good. I was 12th man the week before after the Adelaide game because Bo Kassim was the main spinner. So I've gone from 12th man to playing for Australia. Yep. So you can imagine the headlines. How does he, Nathan Hauritz's career averaging 55 with the ball, how does he get picked? So all of this stuff comes flooding straight back to me. And here I'm going, I'm about to play at the MCG in a Boxing Day test against South Australia, against Callis and all these guys.
South Africa, yeah.
And so I was back into that motion. So I've sort of, the way I pictured it was like, I'm going to go to New South Wales. I'm going to get my bowling back on track. I'm 25, 26, maybe a little bit older. By the time I get to 29, 30, I feel like my game's going to be in a great spot. I'm going to play 3 or 4 years in New South Wales and then, go from there.
Mm. Was there some dark days during that period where you thought, okay, I might not ever get picked for Australia again and throw it in, or were you just determined to go, right, I want to get back?
Probably every second day was like that.
Yeah, right.
It was... When I talk to kids so much, it's all about enjoying, and professional sport is hard. And when you're in that spotlight and it's like trying to explain, you just can't do the basics as well as you want to. I could land the ball in the right spot. I could be a defensive spinner, but to get to the next level, I needed to be able to get the seam into a certain position. I needed to be able to get more revs on the ball and all that sort of stuff. And growing up, we didn't have a spin bowling coach. We don't have everything we do now. We don't have somebody to go, okay, Nathan, your revs are at 1700. Let's get you to 2200 in 2 years' time. To do that, we're going to put this program together. Yeah, right. It was nothing like that. Yep. The coaches were like, oh, mate, you'll be all right.
Just keep bowling.
You'll be good. You'll be fine. The wickets will come.
I wonder how many times you've heard that.
Mate, 10,000.
Just keep bowling.
The same thing too when you're at Queensland cricket. Like, no offence to the system or anything, it was fast bowling. And if I wasn't a good enough spinner to capitalise on my opportunities, I'm going to be left behind very quickly, which is fine and fair. But as a young kid who'd played for Australia, I had a massive chip on my shoulder that felt that I'd earned the right every week to bowl 15, 20 overs. So that was my biggest downfall. And when I made the move to New South Wales, it was purely on the fact that I wanted to become a better cricketer. And I felt that in that system, they had an incredible setup, spin bowling coaches, spinning wicket. Yep. And I'd give myself the best chance of playing for Australia. And down there, I want to do it.
And then through the 17 tests and then your last test, did you think that might have been your last test, or was it brutal that you potentially got dropped? Do you have a recollection of that?
Look, it was horrible I got the phone calls at IKEA that I'd been dropped. Hardest part leading up to that 2-test series in India, I'd come back from a stress fracture so I was out of the game. And I was trying to get so much bowling in me before the Indian series, because after the Indian series, we had the Ashes here in Australia. So
you're thinking in your head, if you get picked for that, you probably didn't do well.
Yeah. So I was already going to India. Yep. So I was like, okay, I've got to get my bowling. And I just wasn't ready. I just wasn't, physically ready.
With the injury, you think?
Yeah. There was no pain or anything like that, but I just, wasn't fit enough and I wasn't bowling consistent enough. So didn't bowl well in India, got dropped. And then at that stage, after getting dropped before the Ashes, I wasn't sure. I was still only...
A bit like the other way around, where you weren't sure you're going to get picked, right?
Yeah. I wasn't sure if it was going to be my last test, because I still felt that I was good enough.
Yeah.
So I got dropped. Australia had picked Doherty, to combat Kevin Peterson and those guys. Didn't work. So I got to go out back play Shield cricket. So I played 4 games for New South Wales. I scored 200s and took 3 fifers.
The batting comes back, mate.
Yeah, so everything started to... So like, it was like as if the stress and the pressure of all that stuff had gone, and I'd actually started to get into my own game. So when just before Michael Beer got picked, Matty Mott was my coach, and he said, mate, you're an absolute no-brainer to get picked back in that. And for once in my life, the actual media were like, Nathan Hauritz has to be picked. He's playing well.
So the press turned positive for you, and you're reading it going, you're sort of uplifting, but at the point you're going, well, actually, I'm being a bit more relaxed.
So I was getting opportunities in my game. So Steve Smith was part of New South Wales, all these kids, and I was really enjoying my cricket. And then anyway, so I didn't get picked. Michael Beer got picked. He played the 1 test, and anyway, I then... After that, because the World Cup was 2 months after that, I'd been picked in the 1-day squad to go for the World Cup. And my game was, like, I felt I was, like, at the top of my game, and then played the game in Hobart one day, I slid, dislocated my shoulder. That was it. Yep. So for a brief moment in my whole career, I felt for probably about 5 games, I was on top of my game. That's probably about it. That when I felt at the top of my game, it was like when I just felt... If I'm given the ball, no matter who I'm bowling to, I could get him out. Whereas I'd never really had that, and that was
right at the tail end of your career.
Yeah, in that moment, just before I did my shoulder. Yeah.
And then when you decided to give up the game, do you remember that?
Yeah. Look, it was. I was coming home from a family holiday. I just played for Queensland throughout the year. We'd won the 1-day cup. I bowled really well, leading wicket taker.
What was the pure? No, it was the what was it called? That Roby, maybe.
I think it was the Roby one.
The Ford Ranger. Yeah.
No, I reckon it was the Roby one. Linney and Cutsey got runs at North Sydney, like 100 off the last 10. Incredible against New South Wales. And I'd bowled really well throughout that series, but that was in October. Played a few 4 days throughout the year, and I'd bowled okay. I was 32 at this stage, 33. And Jason Flores was Queensland, and he was a good cricketer, solid cricketer, and got a phone call saying, look, Nathan, we're going in another direction. We want to give Jason Flores an opportunity to play. And at that stage, I just was like, you know what? I'm physically and mentally done of this. I don't want to do it. So I had to go into professional life and try to be a real estate agent. Still tried to do the T20 stuff, but my heart had really gone at that stage. I really wasn't enjoying it.
And life post-cricket, did you have something in mind at the time? Or was just so focused through that period of playing professional sport? Like it must be. I mean, it must be hard today to these athletes because it's even more pressure and more social media and stuff like that. Going, well, what's the plan post cricket?
Yeah, look, I think I felt that it was too early. I felt I had two or 3 years left, and I wanted to play more and be, the spinner to look after the spinners, and coming through. And I felt that property was going to be my way into professional life after it, because I really enjoyed investing in property. Thought being an agent would be pretty easy, not too much stress. It just wasn't me. I'm not a huge salesman as per se, but the idea of doing work on a Saturday and then having to do it Sunday and always dealing with people, it just didn't work out. So after 4 months, I was done being that, where I think these days there's probably enough money in being a young cricketer that you can set yourself up well enough, and you can, when I was there at the end, it probably wasn't enough. It was there if you're a decent cricketer, but if you're starting out now, I think you got a decent career, and there's enough people around, ex-athletes, in my opinion, that are always there trying to help out the young kids and go, look, yes, you're only 21 and yes, you probably could play for another 15 years. Worst case scenario is you do something tomorrow, you're never going to play again. Let's start to just plan for that moving forward.
Yeah, so there's a bit more support now. And just speaking of support, all the way through those dark moments, did you have your crew? Did you have your people that never gave up on you?
Oh, look, family. Yeah, yep. Family and friends are always there. They're the most important people. You can't ever replace those people. On a professional side, I'd say a couple of mates, in the sporting arena, but you never really know deep down what your mate is, A couple of my best mates that I play, like Chris Hartley, my whole life, we're great mates. James Hope, same thing. I don't think I ever really opened up to either of them and said, you know what, look, literally about to give the game away. That's how I felt at times, because it's not that it's a sign of weakness, but it's just such a weird thing to talk to your mate about, and you probably need to do that stuff,
Yep.
you know, when you are going through those moments, because the coach comes up and their job is to go, you know, Nathan, look, we back you, we believe you, we know you're the best, and everything there. But when you get back home, when you're sitting there going, I can't land it, I don't know what I'm going to do, you know. So you fight through that battle, and you're constantly trying.
Now let's talk about what you're up to now.
Yep.
Right. And you know, I've followed you a little bit for the last 3 or 4 years and getting into the share market, etc. Can you talk about what you're up to?
Yeah, look, I work for a company, so Spark Plus. You know, they're a corporate advisory investor relations firm that's based in Singapore. So it's sort of fortuitous getting that opportunity. The CEO and founder, Omar Tahiri, is a mad cricket man. We connected years ago. I created some online courses and just stayed in touch ever since. And he gave me an opportunity to, I guess it's sort of like a BDM, you know, working in that industry to start with and learning the ropes. And so what we do is really just work with companies and that need under, you know, about 150 mil market cap that need to promote their business, and getting into Asia's our specialty. And for me, it's very similar to sport, you know, because all these industries, they're all striving to A, be the pinnacle of what they're trying to do, look after, you know, their team, which is their shareholders and everything like that, and B, try and make an impact. Try and make an impact. So for me, that it's been very similar, and I've really enjoyed that. And, you know, moving into a role of, you know, managing a team as well now moving forward, I've really enjoyed it.
And the goal of playing for Australia as a kid, now you're in your early 40s. What's the goal now? What are the priorities now?
It's such a good question. You know, I've sat down so many times and thought about it, and I think for me, you know, there's been a few things in my private life that have happened, you know, with my mum. For me, I don't know if I've ever really had a goal professionally outside of cricket. I think being a coach first, the goal is to make sure that whoever I'm coaching in that hour, I can provide a lasting impact, so that if they believe that they can play for Australia or go reach whatever that dream is, I'm going to do everything I can to help them. You know, it's the smallest impact, and every kid that I see, you know, whenever I played, I was always the same. Professionally, as in my role now, you know, the goal is to really just to enjoy life.
Yep.
And it's a really cliche statement, but
I can relate to that.
We work so hard, we work so many hours that I want to be making sure that I'm doing everything I can for the company and working with them. But for me, once it starts to overtake a part of my life that, you know, I'm 43 now, you know, if I start to eat into stuff.
I said early 40s too. I'm 43 too. So we're not mid yet.
We're just there. So yeah, look, I think ideally involving Spark with athletes, you know, we've spoken about that stuff before, but it's honestly, it's just a very, you know, simple statement, just enjoy life, do what I can and try and make an impact. The difference between like coaching a kid, seeing them progress, and then seeing a company and seeing them progress, not much, do you think? Or? No, look, it's not probably
prosperity, you know, following someone's career path, or saying there's a 12-year-old kid that I've coached and now they're 16 and get picked for Queensland 17s. Wow, this is like, it's the warm and fuzzy, right?
Yeah, it's you know, look, I coached some under 12 kids this year as a team, and seeing how they progressed over a 16-week period, it was incredible feeling, you know, and just being part of that is amazing. And I've only been in the industry now about 18 months, you know, and you've been working with different companies and see the highs and lows of being in the public market. It's very tough, but you also see the work that goes into what they do, and it's exponential how much work these CEOs and MDs do. And you want to be there as much as you can, so that when they do have that announcement, when they do hit that milestone, we've been part of that, and we want to keep riding that journey and be with you as much as we can. You know, I think it'd be amazing eventually that, you know, Spark Plus has more offices around the world, you know, so that we keep growing and keep expanding. But I think at the moment, Omar does an amazing job.
A few last questions. I'm going to throw some words at you and you can describe whether you are that person or not.
Okay.
Patient.
No, definitely not. When I played, patience should be as a spinner, the main thing that you do.
Yep.
I was always one of those guys that would bowl 4 balls in the one area, then the 5th ball, I'm like, well, he's only blocking, so I'm going to come around the wicket and see if I can get something else. So definitely not.
Resilient?
100%. I've been through absolute chaos, you know, throughout my career with regard to media and injuries, and as a lot of us do, and you keep fronting up. That's the best definition I can get.
Confident?
I'd like to say yes. I definitely wouldn't have been as confident as probably what you need to be as a professional athlete. You've got to have that little bit of bluff about your game, and even when things aren't going well, you've got to not show it. And that was probably one of my biggest downfalls.
Funny?
Always, that.
Empathetic?
I am now. When I was going through stages of my career, I definitely wasn't empathetic, but being out of the game now, working around kids and seeing a young kid cry or have a temper tantrum because they get out or whatever, I understand, it comes from a place they want to do well, they want to have fun, looking, we were once that age and go through different things and, understanding that for sure.
Excellent. Nathan, mate, thanks so much for coming and having a chat today on the Scoreboard, the podcast, and I really do appreciate you opening up about your life in professional sport and beyond professional sport, which is equally as important, and now enjoying life.
Thank you, mate. Pleasure being on here. Thanks, bud.